Ooh, what's going on, my marketing people? Welcome to another episode of the show. Today, joining me is Alan Nowogrodski. He is the founder and CEO of Caddie. Alan, how you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited, man. I'm excited to have you here and talk all things about building a company. Um, the kind of that work-life integration, understanding how much we should be working, what we should be doing. But before we do that, I want to kind of pass the mic to you. I want to hear your story. What led you to say,
Sure.
"Hey, it's time for me to start my own company"? Walk me through your experience and walk the listeners through kind of how you got to where you're at.
Yeah. So my background in the last 10 years has been in product management. And as a lot of product managers, we have kind of a bit of a background that comes from all over the place. And I think for me, it starts back in high school. I remember being in a grade 11 math class, just kind of bored. Not that I was incredible at math, but I just found myself distracted. And I thought I should just start a business. And I didn't really know what that business should be, but somehow an idea came to mind. At that time, I was converting VHS tapes to DVD. I think that still made sense at that time. And I just put some flyers and went out in the neighborhood and did that for a little while. Made a few dollars, not a lot, but that really got my kind of wheels turning into what eventually, I guess, got me to today. But I still thought I wanted to be in sciences for whatever reason. I stayed in and ended up going to university to study biochemistry. And halfway through, I was still running my little side businesses. I had a web development shop that I've been running throughout university because of the experience that I got. And someone said, "Hey, why don't you switch to business?" And it's like it never really occurred to me that I didn't really want to be a biochemist or a doctor or anything like that. I just kind of enjoyed studying and ended up switching to business, specialized in marketing, and yeah, out of school, ended up actually getting a couple of jobs at some software companies, and did that for a little while. And throughout kind of my early stages of the career, had an idea for a startup. Ended up going all in, raised a little bit of money, went well for a little bit, ended up crashing and burning like a lot of first go. But that really got me excited about not just doing marketing or building websites or the general stuff. I got excited about building product and working with developers. And so out of that, I said, I kind of discovered the role of a product manager, and I realized that's kind of a jack of all trades. You have to be a bit of a designer, a bit of an engineer, a bit of a marketer, and so I kind of put all those together and got into product management. And so I worked as a product manager, building software for a few years, later as a director of product, and eventually as a VP of product. And in my last role, ended up kind of combining my entire career. And I was at a company called Ninja Cat, which is marketing analytics, and I was a VP of product as well as VP of marketing. So I was put everything together, and it was one of those things where a lot of years had gone by since I had started a company. It had been nearly 10 years, but it was in my blood. I never really stopped thinking about it. I was always churning. I was always working on moonlighting on something, doing consulting or doing something. And yeah, through my work at that company, I kind of stumbled on something. I was like, okay, this is the opportunity. And I remember asking to myself, I was like, this is about a horrible time to do it. I had just had my third kid. Um, Basically didn't, it's not like I had accumulated tons of savings because obviously kids are expensive and lots of other things. But I thought today's a bad time. 5 years ago was a bad time. 5 years from now is probably going to be a bad time. So I was like, you know what? Now's as good a time as any. So I took the plunge, and it's been nearly a year now since building Caddy.
I love it. The lights will never all be green. That's for sure when it comes to
Yeah,
doing
yeah.
anything major, right? And starting a company is major. So we talked a little bit off air, right, about the future of work and really looking at sustainable work, right, and building a place that now that it's your own company, building a place where do the best to avoid burnout and put our team in good positions when it comes to their mental physical well-being, while still getting their work completed. And I think it's something that a lot of business leaders are battling with. um, Founders, at least the ones I've met myself, and people are just go go go, million miles a minute, next problem, solve it, next problem, just doing that. So one, I'm interested on, like, you know, what's your philosophy? How do you think about building a more sustainable workplace? And yeah, like where did that epiphany come from? And then let's just kind of talk about, I guess, what that looks like, right? With still, how do companies maintain productivity, um, with while providing the right angles for making sure that it's positive on staff's mental health, physical health, etc.
Yeah, it's interesting because as an entrepreneur, and whether you all have your own business or not, if you've got the bug for wanting to be successful and wanting to do great things, whether it's great work or great products or great success, it's like you feel compelled to put a lot of hours to just do it and just power through and do more. And I definitely feel like a lot of those people that I just want to do more. But I feel like when I was in one of my first jobs, I became good friends with this guy who was actually a director of IT. And I remember there's somebody in his team that had quit, and he was basically taking support calls for this complex product. And he was taking support calls and emails, and he was handling kind of like twice the amount of load that he should have been handling. And he just became really good friends and said hi every morning. And I noticed that he just became more and more tired, and I saw him just kind of like, you could see the demeanor just really changing because how tired he was and kind of stressed that he felt. And I remember one time I asked him like why he was so tired, and he said, "Oh, because I'm staying up late answering to customers, and I'm waking up in the middle of the night because we have customers in Europe, waking up in the middle of the night and answering their challenges." And I remember thinking like, you can't do that. Like this is really tough. Like you have obviously a lot of things to do, but let's figure out a way to do it more effectively. And I wasn't in that department. It wasn't really my role to like address it, but something happened that like really, I think, became a pivotal point for me. And so one day out of nowhere, we get a call, and he died of a heart attack playing badminton. And this guy used to be a professional badminton player. He still played competitively on a weekly basis. And so he was fairly healthy. And, I can't say that he died because he worked too much. I can't. I'm sure that it must have been a contributing factor. And maybe it wasn't. But to me, I remember not just going to the funeral and just seeing how the rest of the company reacted, how the CEO of the company reacted to it, who was personally creating a lot of that pressure. And the most impactful thing that happened was the day after, which was like, who's going to pick up his work? And the reality is that his entire work was not picked up, only parts of it. And there were parts that no one did, and the company was perfectly fine after that. And it's like this thing of like, this guy potentially gave his life to this job that, like, who cares? And for what? The company was fine. Like, this is this artificial pressure that we created. And it really kind of, I think, changed everything for me after that. And every time a manager said, "Hey," as a product manager, sometimes you got to meet deadlines. And so I would have a manager saying, "Hey, once you get your team to stay late and we'll order pizza and everything." I was like, "No, I'm not doing that. Like, show me where it says this deadline is that critical that the company will collapse if we don't meet it." And there are certainly those that show up that's real, but 99% of the time that's not the case. And so I really have taken that kind of situation and apply it to everything. It's like, is it really that important, or do we just need to like take a step back and think about how do we do it sustainably? Because we talk about burnout as if it's just like, oh, we feel bad, but it's like, no, these are real lives.
Yeah, and there's consequence for it, right? And this is one of those things that, um, I've had to say to my team too, or like something's going on, and I'm like, guys, everybody, we're just making social media content. Like, it's just like, it's not that serious, Like, it's just, I want everyone to breathe. Like, I always joke, I'm like, it's just Facebook ads. Like, it's really not that crazy. And like,
Yeah.
if it comes a day late, it comes a day late. Like you're saying, a lot of times, these deadlines and pressures. Although I believe having a deadline is good, because if you don't have one, people will just work forever on things and over tinker. So I do believe in having deadline, but I agree that,
Yeah.
if it's gonna be missed by a day, it's okay. Go home, sleep. Don't stay here till 3 in the morning. Like, that to me is so huge, because when you take your mindset from we're on a marathon, not a sprint, then you can start to think like, okay, what's the best way to win a marathon? People on marathons are stopping,
Mm.
they're eating, they're stretching mid-marathon, they're doing things to make sure that they can continue to go forward. Where sprinters, it's all or nothing. That's it, right? They go for it, and I think taking that mindset a lot of times to work is positive. So now, how now that you've taken that and you've said, okay, the philosophy of this whole thing. I'm going to change kind of my
Hmm.
philosophy. Maybe maybe I'm gonna not keep the team late. I'm gonna do all these things. How do you kind of counterbalance that for the person who's listening and says, okay, that's all great, but like if I have a fully
Hmm.
remote team and just let them do full open schedule and take 2 weeks off for any time they want and whatever, how do I also ensure that things do get done, right? Especially if we're looking at startups that have raised money, have external pressure from VC, angel investor, et
Yeah.
cetera, and have the deadline. How do you manage that? Are you all, do you think like OKRs or check-ins? Like, what do you do? I'm interested.
I, I keep something in my desk. I'll show you. It's a golden sign that says focus, and that I think is my answer. It's like a lot of the time, why are we rushing? Is because we're not focused. If we really look at what we're doing and we list everything that we're trying to do and we ask ourselves, okay, we've got 5, 7, 20 things. Like, what are the three that absolutely have to get done? Because I guarantee you, whether you have a VC that's interested in something, or a customer that's upset, or an employee that needs something, there are one or two things that are really, really important. And then there's a bunch of things that we're running so fast that we forget to ask the question of, is that even that important? And I think just like whether you think about, like I said, your internal team, what does your internal team lead? There's probably one or two things that if we just did that, they really wouldn't care about the others. And the other way, if we accomplished half of 10 things, but not accomplished the two things they really care about, it does not matter how much you accomplish. At the end of the day, you still fail to them. And so I really just try to think about it from that perspective of like, just take a step back and just focus.
It's so true, man. The Pareto Principle just rings true over and over again. That you know, 20% usually of the tasks are responsible for 80% of the outcomes in business success. So I'm with you on that. It's taking that approach to say, okay, let's focus. Let's think about the big tasks that we can tackle, um, and that they're getting done, right? The things that are fundamental to
Yeah.
keeping the business moving. I think um, that's so important. Now, as your company grows, you said you're just over a year, correct? Since it
Yeah.
made the leap, so the company's in a growth mode. Um, how do you validate ideas when you can seemingly go all directions for growth when you first start, right? You don't have an established path. You can go any way, which way. I would love to hear how you kind
Yeah.
of decipher the signals versus noise when it comes to, pulling certain levers to grow the business.
I think that's probably one of the toughest things. Like, whether you have a two-person startup or you work at Google, I you will have the exact same problem. You will come into a position where you're building a product that you think may or may not be successful, and then you put it out to market, and sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. And there are plenty of Google products that are failed, and there are plenty of two-person startup products that fail. And so, um, the problem of like validating is I think one of the toughest problems, because you could have infinite resources and still not figure it out. And I think a lot of times as we think about validating a product, that's like, I'm going to build it, I'm going to show a bunch of people, and then if they like it, I'm going to go out and build more of it and keep building and keep trying to sell it. Um, and I feel like the way I look at it is kind of upside down. And what I preach is really like what a lot of the new startup kind of mentality has been about. It's like this idea of like, validate before you build anything. And sometimes that feels hard. It feels like, how could I possibly validate? Like, okay, I've read the book, I've read Lean Startup, and I know that I need to validate things. It's like, but the amount of effort it takes to validate, we sometimes think, oh, I talked to three people, or I sketched this thing out, and I'm done, and that's validation. And I think the validation journey is so much longer than than we think. And if we just like stay focused on validating and getting deeper, then you start getting into minimizing your risk as much as possible.
100%. Yeah, it's interesting because I always think whenever I, see articles on that type of thing, and I'm always like, okay, what's the time horizon, right? And how do we
Hmm.
set a time horizon for each thing? We're an agency. Our agency sales cycle, we're looking at like a 9-month sales cycle. So how can it's a little bit tough for me to be like this one action if we try to validate it right away, right? I also have to say,
Hmm.
do I have the funds to see this out over 9 months to say, will it work? So then I got to make that judgment based on like, just business fundamentals, I guess. But um,
Yeah.
it's a challenge, man. It's a challenge to sit there and think like putting the time horizon on the validation, right? So starting a podcast, all the thing I want to grow a podcast. If you do 3 episodes, your podcast is going to be bad. It's not going to work, right? I think so.
Yeah.
I'm always intrigued on how much leeway do you give something, right? And that to me is yeah, I mean, I'd throw it back to you there. Like, if have you all started something or a new product feature, and then, okay, do you put a time horizon on that? Is it just erring on the side of speed? Like, how do you validate?
I think I think about it from the perspective of like not what is the metric that I'm ultimately trying to achieve, but like you said, like what is the signal that might tell me that eventually I'll hit that metric? Because the ultimate metric that we're all looking to achieve is probably a lagging indicator. So if your goal is to generate revenue out of this product, like that'll take you a while. But if your goal is to see, am I able to get one, take a podcast for example, am I able to get the listener to podcast 1 to listen to podcast 2 and 3? That's a leading indicator that I created enough value that this person, regardless of their life and all the different factors in their life, they somehow decided to come back. And that could be a leading indicator that you're on the right track. And I often think about it from a product perspective, at least, is to try to identify 3 independent signals that would all lead you to one metric, and almost like as a proxy. Is like you can't prove indisputably that it is going to achieve the result that you want to achieve. But much like triangulating like cellular towers, like if you have three kind of signals that are independent proxies, the chances that all of those three are positive, but the result is negative, it's fairly small. And so the idea is just like find 3 things that you could measure on day 0, maybe without even having the product built, that you could measure. And then, yeah, I mean, honestly, that's your best shot. And at the end of the day, is like you just have to take a chance. Like there's no substitute for taking a chance. Like find the best signals and try to triangulate and take a chance. And we're gonna fail a bunch, and that's just the nature of things.
Well, it's like what you said at the start, right? Yesterday was a bad time. Today's a bad time. 5 years from now is going to be a bad time. It's the same thing with like launching product sets, features, going a new marketing
Yeah.
campaign, hiring a person, whatever. Like at a certain point, like you can data yourself to death sitting there going like, is it perfect, this or that? And like, look, I don't bring an umbrella out with me when it's 5% chance of rain, right? So like,
Yeah.
so that to me is
Yeah.
at a certain point we have to go, oh, it's 95% chance sun. All right, let's bet today on that, right? And obviously that's uh a reductionist point, but it still makes sense, I think. It's like, okay, eventually you gotta just go for it. Alan,
Yeah.
thank you so much today for coming on, man. For anyone who wants to learn more about Caddy, where should they go? And then two, if anyone wants to connect with you, where should they head?
Yeah, love to chat. You can hit salescaddy.ai. And if you want to reach out to me, I think the place where I hang out the most is really LinkedIn. So just go for Alan Nowogrodski on LinkedIn, and happy to connect. And my background is kind of all over the place, and I'm always looking to help founders who've got product ideas or things, and bring product management side, a design, marketing to it. So happy to help anybody out there.
I love it. I'll put links to both those in the show notes page. Alan, thanks again for coming on today, man. I really appreciate it.
Now, thank you for having me.
All right, everybody, that's it for this episode. As always, I'm your host, Jordan Shelton, and I'll catch you next time.